So I'm Brian Lynn. I am the OSG Software Area Coordinator, and as Brian Bachman said, I'll be talking today about the status of OSG 3.6 and our token transition. So before we dive into the picture of today, I'll provide a little bit of background. Since time immemorial, the Globus toolkit was a central core of the OSG software stack. And I may need a resident OSG historian to correct me if I'm wrong there, because at the time that the OSG started, my main use of the internet was probably coordinating Diablo 2 sessions on AOL Instant Messenger. But I digress. The parts of the Globus toolkit that we're still using today regard secure communications in the OSG because we have a lot of distributed users in the OSG and servers and whatnot. We have to make sure that everybody is who they say they are. And these communications are then secured with X509 certificates and proxies through the Globus security infrastructure, or more commonly known as GSI. Many collaborations make use of Grid FTP as a common solution for remote storage access and shipping different files and data sets around to closer to where their compute locations may be. So in June 2017, Globus announced that they would end support for the open source Globus toolkit that we were depending on. I forget exactly when that support ended, maybe the end of 2018. But in October 2017, we responded to this by helping form the Grid Community Forum in collaboration with a lot of our friends across the Atlantic and EGI and Nordigrid. And our main task for the GCF was to continue support of this toolkit so that research can still continue to be done without major disruption to everybody supporting the research on the computing side. And this new toolkit was then named the Grid Community Toolkit. And one thing to be aware of is that the OSG software team's central mission is to provide a robust and stable integrated software stack. And so the OSG software team will do a little bit of development here and there to smooth out rough edges between larger pieces of software, but we're not really tasked with taking on the maintenance of a large software stack such as the GCT. So it's actually, we were able to do this with lots of help from the EGI and Nordigrid folks that I had mentioned. So in 2019, we developed a transition plan to transition from GSI and Grid FTP towards bearer tokens and WebDAV-based file transfer. You can see the details in this link here. And this is what the timeline looked at like around February 2022 or February 2020, which is the last time I traveled for work. And we presented this at an RSHEP review for the NSF. And so you'll see here that this spans over 3 years, and we are in the home stretch. Now, some of you, or many of you, probably know that we have not yet ended support for OSG 3.5 and thus Grid FTP and GSI. But as Brian mentioned, that this has been 5 years in the making. I'm not all too concerned about a few months of slippage here. So these new technologies of bearer tokens and WebDAV really aren't new. They're new in the OSG context, but you are likely very familiar with WebDAV and tokens just as a user of the internet. WebDAV is just an extension of HTTPS, allowing for distributed authoring and versioning of files. You are probably familiar with CalDAV, which is an extension on WebDAV that allows you to interact with various calendaring systems. Bearer tokens are also used a lot in the OSG. You may notice this when you access a website that may ask you to sign in with, say, your Google credentials. And then it may bring you to a page that says Google wants to provide access to this application or website, and then you say authorize, and then everything kind of just works. So what bearer tokens are under the hood, they are capability-based versus identity-based credentials. And so the analogy that we like to use is if you want to attend a soccer game, for instance, you buy a ticket and you are given a ticket and you present it at the door, and they don't ask to see your ID or verify that you are who you say you are. The ticket just says admit one. And so this move to bearer tokens allows us to separate the identity of the specific user and instead focus on what the holder of this credential should be allowed to do, say submitting jobs to a CE, reading storage, or writing to storage areas and whatnot. These bearer tokens are based on JSON Web Tokens, JWTs, or JOTs. And they describe their capabilities through various claims. And there are different profiles that define what these different claims are. And so you'll see on the right that there are various claims in this token. There is a version claim saying this is a side token. Oh, and also the OSG will support claims for the side tokens and the WLCG JOT profiles. You'll see that this token is issued by demo.sidetokens.org. It expires at a certain time. It was issued at a certain time and is not valid before a certain time. There are other claims that describe some of the capabilities that are then described in these profiles that I mentioned. So we know that many of you have been using X409 for a very long time. We probably have centuries of collective knowledge about various OpenSSL commands to tease apart a proxy or a certificate and whatnot. So to help everybody transition to tokens, we have been hard at work writing a bunch of different documentation. So the first piece of documentation here is a token overview for sites. This provides an introduction to bearer tokens. It provides definitions of important token claims. And then the details about the differences between side tokens and WLCG tokens. And then we have tables of the various collaborations and their status of token and WebDAV support, and whether or not they are supporting them in production, if they're actively testing them and whatnot. And we try to keep these up to date. We also have a document that is a bit more technically focused, boots on the ground, command line type stuff about how to actually use the tokens and how you can get tokens based on your provider. Say if you are a member of the CMS collaboration, then you have methods of requesting a token from CMS. Alternatively, if you are contributing to the OS pool, or what was formerly known as the OSGVO, we do not have what is called a token provider, an OIDC provider. And so you cannot request a token from us, but there are ways to generate test tokens. And this document describes how to do that. This document also goes into how to validate tokens and then inspect their contents. We also have a document that is an overview for collaborations, for those of the collaboration that have not yet started their journey for supporting tokens. It describes the different token issuer options. There is the direct signing option for issuing tokens, and that is what many of the simpler, in quotes, collaboration use cases may call for. or you may use an OpenID Connect or OIDC provider. And like I said, CMS, Atlas, many of the WLCG VOs are using what's called Indigo IAM. Then there are folks like Fermilab collaborations. They are using they have a contract with CI Logon as their OIDC provider. And then this also goes into detail about the different claims for the tokens and how, as a collaboration, you should be populating them for the best compatibility with OSG sets. And then last but not least, there is the documentation for updating to OSG 3.6. This has been around for quite a while, but we recently revamped it with an overview of token and WebDAV considerations for the various OSG services. And then this document also has service-specific instructions for updating to OSG 3.6. So OSG 3.6, as I mentioned before, we did not hit our initial target for the OSG 3.5 end of life. This was originally, I think, end of January, and then we moved it to end of February when we submitted the IRIS HEP secondary PEP or project execution plan, that is. And then this was most recently extended to through May 1st of this year by request of various members of our stakeholders through the OSG Council. So what is actually in OSG 3.6, or rather what is not in OSG 3.6? There are a couple of packages that are no longer available. The obvious ones will be Grid FTP and GSI. We also are not directly supporting Hadoop anymore in the OSG software stack. And as a result of not supporting GSI, we are also not including LC maps. There are also some special considerations, of the packages that are left, there are some special considerations. So for HTCSS, OSG does not compile Condor with GSI support. And this is specifically for OSG 3.6. And what this actually means is that GSI job submission will not work. Proxy delegation, on the other hand, will still work. This means, in effect, that you can submit your jobs to ACE, for example, with a token and a X509 proxy. And the token will then be used to authorize that job to be submitted into the queue. And once that job starts running, the proxy delegation workflow will continue to work. So when the proxy is renewed on the client side, that renewal will make its way all the way down to the execution point. XRD is also an interesting case. XRD actually supports GSI natively without any GSI libraries. So XRD will continue to support GSI and VOMS proxies. It just won't do it through LC maps like we had previously shipped in OSG configurations. We have also added some new release series based container tags. So instead of just release or release and the date, we have released we have started to build 3.6 release and 3.6 release date container tags. So you know that you are getting the 3.6 containers or software rather. So to dive into detail about OSG 3.6, the real potentially difficult service is your CE, because XRD will continue to support GSI, but Condor will not. So really, you should only update to OSG 3.6 if your collaborations support tokens. If they do not, I highly recommend updating to OSG 3.5 upcoming if you have not already. And the reason being is that the versions of Condor CE and Condor between OSG 3.5 upcoming and OSG 3.6 are the same. The only difference being that the version in OSG 3.6 does not support GSI-based pilot submissions. If you are doing this, if you are staying on OSG 3.5 upcoming, then I highly recommend that you consult your collaborations for their timelines to see if they are going to make this May 1st deadline. And if they're not, reach out to us, let us know. Some important packages and versions that you should be aware of when installing a CE, either from upcoming or 3.6, is the SciTokens library. That should be 0.7.0 or above. And this is provided actually by Apple. It's not in the OSG software Yum repositories. And then the OSG SciTokens map file. This is similar to the VO client, except this just includes token to user mappings for CEs in particular. That package is important to keep up to date. There was a very big update in version 6 of a lot of new collaborations being added to that map file. In OSG 3.6, you'll also see simplified Gracia accounting on the CE. Previously, Gracia probe would run as root, and depending on your batch system, it may need read access to your Slurm database or something like that. Instead, now Gracia probe runs as a cron under Condor. So it's run as an unprivileged user, and it parses the Condor CE history files to determine the accounting records. So we have specific documentation about how to make sure that's set up correctly, but please be aware of that. We've also cleaned up the OSG configure configuration. There may be a bunch of RPM save and RPM new files. That is also documented. But if you have any questions, please definitely reach out directly to us. And some of the other services are going to be simpler, or most of them really. OSG X3D, if you're using the OSG X3D meta package, you'll notice the switch over from LC maps to the native GSI and VOMS plugins. Watch out for your RPM new and RPM save files. If you are not using the OSG X3D meta package, then you may have to hand edit your own configuration to move away from LC maps. If you have a grid FTP server, we recommend, if you want to continue receiving OSG support, to install the OSG X3D standalone server as a replacement. If you have a Condor pool, there are specific update instructions for the Condor pool, especially for the update from the 8.8 version to the 9.0 version. But honestly, I think the biggest change will be the drop in GSI support. And hopefully you are not using GSI authentication between the daemons in your Condor pool. Frontier Squid and the worker node client really should not be any sort of big concern between 3.5 and 3.6. So we just recommend Yum updating those at your earliest convenience. And that's all I had. So are there any questions?
So Brian, I'd like to ask you a question when you mentioned that the end of life for 3.5 is on May 1st. But then you say if our collaborations are not ready to, are not yet supporting tokens, to contact us. Who's the us? Is this OSG? Is it University of Wisconsin?
This is OSG. At this help@openscienceGrid.org would be a great place to reach out to. We're also very active on Slack. If you have an account or would like an account on the OSG Slack, let us know in the Zoom chat, or well, I guess you can't reach the all hands channel in our Slack if you don't have a Slack account. So yeah, Zoom chat if you'd like an account, or email works too.
Okay.
All right, I see some conversation going on in the chat, but it seems to be pretty active. If anybody asking questions in the chat would like to raise their hand to repeat, that's hard to tell which is all answered, which isn't. But in the meantime, I see Doug Benjamin's asked a question. Doug?
Are we going to avoid the 3.5 collision like we had before? Are we on path to be able to handle the token transition, at least for compute elements across WLCG from your perspective?
Yeah, I think we're actually in a really good spot. So I do have some backup slides here, and specifically about the WLCG picture that I was mostly hoping to save for, we're having a discussion about this on Friday. Specifically for the Atlas case, I think earlier this week, Petter just sent out basically the thumbs up on moving to 3.6 for US Atlas sites. And USCMS is really not far behind. Does that answer your question?
Except your slide still, I mean, there's still this 24/7. Have all the time limits essentially been adjusted in the library so that we get longer tokens? We get multi-day tokens?
Yep, so that has been, that change for extended tokens, I think they're 96 hours at this point, issued by the Atlas IAM server. And to support that, CEs need to update their SciToken CPP packages.
Okay, so there's a new code release that handles the longer lifetime.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, I see David Sanders has raised his hand, and I think maybe in the interest of keeping Dave on time, David, if you can ask a question quick, and that'll be the last question.
Well, I'm just reiterating what I discussed yesterday about the fact that, yeah, until other VOs that our site involves with have tokens, we can't switch to 3.6, full stop.
Yeah, and I believe Bell 2 was the VO or collaboration that you were most concerned about. I know Doug is here. I don't know if he can speak to the Bell 2 BNL side of things, but it would really be good to apply some pressure to Bell 2. But that's something we can definitely talk about offline. Email us. We will be. Let me go back. We will have an afternoon discussion that goes pretty long. So feel free to join us and start brainstorming with that.